Hey there. Good to see everybody. I'm back. Uh, been. Hey there. Good to see you too. I'm back. I took a little bit of a break yesterday. I guess we're bombing Iran now or something like that. So I figured I'd just take a day for myself to decompress. Um, and yeah, yeah. But I'm back now, and I can stream today, and tomorrow I'll be traveling. So I was thinking of maybe doing weekend streams, but we'll see how that goes. Um, so uh, probably we'll be able to stream Monday, and I update my schedule as I know what my own schedule is like. So we'll see. If I do stream Monday, it'll probably be earlier than usual. Um, I just finished work on an adventure I was working on, so that's good. Not for Vampire the Masquerade, for a different system, something completely unrelated, but having to do with bikers and stuff like that. So kind of Sabat related, a little Sons of Anarchy vibe, yeah. Uh, so we'll see. I'll keep you posted when that is coming out, and work on everything else. Continues at pace. Playing the Camarilla, and of course the Buried Below the Roots, which is a title I like, but maybe I'm gonna work on it a little. I'm still brainstorming that one. I think it works, but we'll see. It's a little wordy maybe, um, but we'll see how that goes. Uh, More importantly, I guess I saw that they're coming out with a politics book for V5 now, which is great. Maybe several years a bit late, about 10 years too late maybe for when we needed it. But hopefully it'll be a companion and will work. I didn't work on it personally. Hopefully it'll be a companion piece to the Ivory Tower playing the Camarilla. I suspect it will have more of all the sects. I assume just Anarch and Camarilla, maybe a little bit of Autarchus, and see how it goes. I assume, right, Gord, I assume where we'll contradict each other is on the Justicars. I suspect they will have a very different interpretation of the Justicars than I will. Uh, so, and also, our book, of course, will be completely dedicated to the Camarilla, not kind of chopped up into it. And we're a little less hesitant to delve in the meta plot than V5 is in general. So I suspect they won't really talk about the Ashira at all in that book. I honestly expect there to maybe be a page or two on the Ashira. They're very hesitant to touch on the Ashira since the core book stuff. Um, and every book that has kind of promised to talk about the Ashira has failed to do so. So I definitely noticed that this book made no mention of the Ashira as far as I know. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but I expect there'll be nothing. Not that the Camarilla book really talks about the Ashira that much, other than just like with the Sabbat book, we keep it in the conversation. We don't completely ignore it as a thing. We don't just kind of excise it and memory hole it. We keep it in the conversation. We keep the concept alive and work it in where we can. Just with the Sabbat book, where they talk about their enemies, they often mention the Camry and the Ashira in the same breath. When they talk about the kind of vampire, politicians, I guess, that they kill, they say princes, emirs, viziers, all that stuff. Though emir is basically just the Arabic word for prince, so very much that's kind of ambiguous. Of course, emir is also a Camarilla title, obviously. Um, so I don't know if I'm excited for that book. I hope it's good, and I hope our book and their book don't have too much static or friction. I don't know when it's supposed to come out, but perhaps we'll come out around the same time, or they'll come out a little earlier than us, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. I guess the only real criticism I'll have of the two latest book, the Succubus Club book, and I haven't read Course of the Dam, obviously. Um, but the only criticisms I have really of those books is that they're kind of a throwback to V5 core, and that they're a bit scattered. Um, it seems like they're kind of all over the place. They're not very focused. Not as so much as V5 core. I suspect that has to do with the fact of kind of bringing back the original one of the original writers and editors from V5 core. That obviously they kind of brought back that style from 10 years ago. I hope I don't know if they've been writing much in RPGs in the past 10 years. I don't think they have. I think this is kind of the first RPG stuff they've done since V5 Core. So that's a little strange because it kind of doesn't jive with the stylistic and narrative approaches of the more recent books, like Tattered Facade and Vampire's Player's Guide, obviously. And personally, the covers. Oh my goodness, the covers are such a downgrade from all the other V5 covers. I mean, I don't really know. Even V5 Core had a better cover than these two books. Succubus Club's not so bad. It's muddy, very muddy. And this isn't a shot at the artist at all. The artist did incredible work. Just for the cover of a book, you want something that really grabs you. So something that's like kind of dark or muddy, that's not really what I'd want from a book cover. I want something that really kind of has something iconic that kind of gets you to want to open the book. I would say that both those images would have been good as like internals, maybe half pagers. I don't think I would have used them as full cover, full front, full chapter images. But yeah, Succubus Club I'd say is a bit muddy, and Courts of the Damned is kind of a rehash of a picture from the core book. I don't know if it's a drawing or just an image made to look like a drawing of the Ventrue kind of holding someone on a leash. It grabs me a bit more than the Succubus Club cover, I guess. But yet again, kind of washed colors doesn't really grab you. Obviously, I'm very biased. I have collaborated a lot with Mark Kelly in the past. He's basically done all the covers of note and kind of saved our ass in one case when the Hunter book was released and the cover was just like universally and globally ridiculed. Not because it was bad work, but because it really didn't fit with the World of Darkness stylistically, like the artistic style that the World of Darkness had developed in the modern era, the Hunter book's cover just did not fit at all. It was this live cover. It looked like everybody said it looked like a band, like a Norwegian band album cover, which is fair. It's fair. It kind of did. It looked like Soundgarden's first album, like some kind of promo shot for that. And of course, Mark came basically got a cover to the team, I think over a weekend, and it's a great cover. It's a beautiful cover. A huge improvement. Not to mock or ridicule the work of the artist, whose work is still in the Hunter book and is very good. It just wasn't a good fit for the cover. So it's no shame on the artist at all, of course. They're just obviously, just like with writing, sometimes some writing fits into some books and not in others. There's some writing that I would want for the Sabbat book that I would not want for the Cambria book because it would not fit, narratively or aesthetically. And so the same is with, book covers. So yeah, that's really the only real downsides I can see to those books. I'm looking forward to them. I actually I haven't really picked up any books in a while. I guess I kind of got spoiled whenever they'd send me the free books. They'd always send me the complete set, or at least the PDFs. So I haven't really bought any books that I haven't worked on or that came out after my last work on stuff. Except for the books that I guess they just don't send people. Yeah, I never got Chicago. I never got Cult of the Blood Gods. Those actually were not even in the library of official books as when I was working on V5. So, and I haven't worked on anything since before, right before Tattered Facade. So I'm kind of out of the loop there. In fact, I think I don't even have a physical copy of Gehenna War, even though our material is, in that book from the Black Hand playing this about. Yeah, I hope so that Chicago and cults are mentioned in the work on some level. It would make sense. I mean, it's basically the biggest repertoire of Oblivion in the whole setting. And as far as I know, Chicago is the only by night book, really, that has been released. And I don't think they're planning on making any more, as far as I can see. So that's a lot of kind of NPCs to leave on the wayside, really. Not to mention the lore sheets and all that. Yeah, Succubus Club, of course, should mention Chicago for obvious reasons. That is indeed where the Succubus Club is. Yeah. Yeah, so that's good news for V5. I'd kind of been a little worried because the release schedule for World of Darkness is so light anyway. 2 to 3 books a year is a very light schedule, very light work. So I suspect these are the last of Johanna's work on V5. I believe he's moved on, and that Rachel has kind of moved into the spot there at Renegade. I don't think it's exactly the job Johanna did, but very similar, I think. So we'll see what the kind of new vision for V5 is. I suspect it'll be more Tattered Facade kind of stuff. Rachel, of course, have done a lot of adventures. I think Knives at Midnight might be hers. I know she has at least one adventure that I think is set in Chicago, but I think she's written 2 or 3 of the Renegade adventures. I've written 2 or 3 Renegade adventures as well. Last Dance at Renaud's and Monster Hunting 101. Those are the 2 I've written for Renegade. The kind of intro Hunter adventure and the Weekend at Bernie's Anarch/Camarilla adventure. I personally think it would have been better as a Camarilla adventure, focused Camarilla, but at that point we were still kind of under directions that everything would be assumed Anarch facing, which personally I think is a mistake, given how light the material is on Anarchs. Uh, so uh, that's all good news. I'm glad, I myself have been talking to the new people at Paradox who are running World of Darkness, and I try to keep a line open with the people I know at Renegade. Uh, Currently, I'm not any books for them, but we'll see what the future holds. Hopefully, something will come up, and also there potentially some good news on the horizon about some other matters. So we'll see how that goes. Not too vague, not too vague book, um, but the books. Speaking of books, the Black Hand playing the Sabbat. I don't know if I'll get through all the Ritae today. I think I have about an hour and a half, hour and a half. I have a hard stop because I have an important errand to run. I have to pick up my son from school. So let us get into it. There are a lot of Ritae. I will try to get through the Auctoritas Ritae today. I think I can do that. There are not a lot of them, though they are kind of long-winded. And I do have a lot to say. If I can make one video on basically Auctoritas Ritae and Numinous Ritae with just kind of a blurb about Ignobilis in the middle there, then I'll be very happy. If I can get through all of it in one video in one shot, then that would be great. Yeah, and just because I've got a time limit, Gord, don't feel like you can't ask questions. If you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free. I was very happy to sneak a Thomas Ligotti quote in here in the beginning. Is the only value of this world lay in its power to suggest another world, that this world is basically worthless, but it shows you how worlds work. And basically how changing worlds work. I think that's a very powerful representation. Ligotti, of course, is an incredible horror writer. Nowadays, you really can't quote music lyrics anymore in books like you used to. If you're an old Vampire the Masquerade player and reader, then you're probably aware that basically all the old books used to quote music nonstop. Especially kind of gothier bands and all that. A little bit of rap, but mostly kind of like goth bands. And that was great because it really gave you a vibe and a stylistic feel. And before it became kind of common to list media at the end of books, which is not really in vogue anymore. But for a while, it was pretty common to list media in the end of books to be like, yeah, this is like the movies and songs and all that. But right, you could build whole mixtapes based on the music in Montreal by Night that was quoted in Montreal by Night in the Sabbat books, and that was fantastic. You could do it for the Vampire Core book too, I think, though it wouldn't have been much of a mixtape. It was really kind of the later books in second edition that really had that. I think it was like the original Player's Guide, the Storyteller's Handbook, and then of course all the Sabbat books really followed that. And I think it kind of fell off around Dirty Secrets of the Black Hand because you'd get sued. So music just operates on a completely different copyright than literature, books, or a lot of other things. So if you're big enough, you could get sued. And so basically, I forget when they started doing it, but I think in the early 2000s when I was writing for World of Darkness, they basically told us no more music quotes because we're getting cease and desist letters and we don't want to get sued. And I think part of that actually was because White Wolf picked a fight with Sony over Underworld. That's kind of what I heard. And so Sony basically went through all their books and was like, oh, you're quoting some of our musicians in here, so we're going to sue the shit out of you. That's kind of what I heard. I don't know if that's true. But we were told to stop using any reference to songs in our work. We were not to quote songs or music or musicians in the chapters. And so we kind of moved to authors and mostly horror writers, obviously, when we quote people. And if you look through the books, that's basically the standard. Like all the new books, Tatter Fasadi, then it's just authors, no musicians. I'm sure there's a slip up here and there. Even in I quote Muhammad Darwish in a lot of my books, and I think in Alma Mater, the last Hunter book I wrote about, I quote Steve Jobs, which is kind of hilarious. Steve Jobs, towards the end of his life, which is a horrendous, terrible story if you read about how his life ended. Actually, he really fucked himself over by not seeking treatment for cancer immediately. If you get cancer, I would suggest you immediately go to a doctor and pick a treatment plan right away. Jobs, unfortunately, I think spent a year seeking holistic kind of new age treatment, and refused any kind of modern medicine, basically. And he had a very aggressive form of cancer. And in that year, it went from being very treatable to being lethal. And he couldn't even getting a organ transplant, which he kind of went around the system with his wealth to gather, did not extend his life in a meaningful way. So that's kind of not that I love Steve Jobs or anything like that, but it's an incredible quote, and it basically talks about being kind of naked and afraid in the presence of your own mortality, which is an incredible thing for kind of a billionaire to think about, that all this wealth and power and clout is basically worthless in the end. And what did his life mean in a sense? But it's also Steve Jobs, so he's not really able to escape his own narcissism. I don't think I have the book in PDF here or the quote to mind, but it is a fun quote. And that section of that book is, I recommend it. My section, I mean, the whole book is great. And Chant, who I believe was the developer, is an incredible developer who's always done a great job developing work. So I definitely highly recommend any book they're on usually. But that whole book is pretty good, I'd say. But I especially loved my section, which is kind of funny. There's a little funny story there. I know this is all aside, but anyway. When I worked on Alma Mater, my section was basically about like a tech startup incubator inside a university, right? And I forget what it was called. It was called Keen. And I picked that because it's basically about digital banshees. So it's the company is called Keen, and it's basically an incubator university. And so it also touched upon basically how these moneyed interests and corporate interests have infiltrated higher learning in America, and how the university, in a sense, has become, these universities have become beholden to moneyed interests and corporations, and they really don't serve their students anymore. I mean, as we saw with the protests against the Israeli genocide in Gaza, those universities were not concerned at all about cracking the heads of their students or upsetting their parents when they basically sicked riot police on them. And in the case of UCLA, allowed a mob of vigilantes, of just Zionists off the street that belonged to this Batar organization, which is now illegal in the U.S., at least in New York, to descend on them and beat them. And they actually used that riot as an excuse to send in the riot police the next few nights. So as we saw, the reason that was allowed to happen is because those universities are completely beholden to corporate interests. Their boards are completely captured by moneyed interests, sometimes not even alumni. And it's really about their endowments that they invest. They really don't give a shit about their students or your tuition. Your tuition that pays that pays for the land you're sitting on. Like everything else is the endowments. It's kind of crazy. Like Harvard, I forget the number, but I remember Harvard's kind of the golden child, is because it has like the largest endowment of any university in America. I think it's somewhere around $300 billion or something insane like that. Just more money than they would make, off of tuition in decades, just because of the size of the school. And that also explains why tuition balloons, because, they have lost touch with the reality and the means of the people they're supposed to be serving. So that book was kind of funny because one of the notes I got back, which obviously came from one of the Europeans, maybe Johanna or someone like that, because they clearly didn't understand how corporate captured our universities were. They were like, this book is about universities. Why is this a corporation here? Make it more university focused. And I was like, that's how universities work here. I don't know how they work in Europe, but here in America, like, all the stadiums are named after banks or gambling apps. And all the universities have wings named after alumni who are fabulously rich, and have they're basically corporations, and they're feeders into corporations. That's how they exist. So that was kind of funny, and that was a fun little section to work on. Basically, it was about digitizing and monetizing grief. Basically, an app that basically sold itself as an AI of a deceased loved one, so you could continue to chat with a deceased loved one, but in actuality, it was a trapped or exploited spirit, not the spirit of your dead loved one, but a malefic creature from the other side, that was basically pretending to be your loved one, to feed off of your grief and to steal your secrets, and then basically to transfer those secrets back to its masters, who would share it with the corporation at the, so they could monetize that and better target ads, and potentially maybe even blackmail you or sell your information to the government. So it's kind of crazy because that book came out maybe a year ago, and we'd written it maybe a year before that. Obviously, I keep track of AI, and I've written about AI and warfare and all that. So it was top of mind when I was writing it. But now we're seeing that this is actually the case, that a lot of stuff that is being presented to us as AI are actually exploited workers, where they're in India, or in the case of Google, they're using people in Kenya to basically sort through all the data to train the AI. But right now, it's still these exploited, kind of barely making, not even making minimum wage workers. I think this was just exposed that Google Glass, their glasses, all images captured by Google Glass are being sent to Kenya, and real people are sorting through those images to try to train the AI on better image recognition and all that. So all those private moments, you can only imagine what private moments could be captured on Google Glasses, and conversations are being sifted through by real people, being fed to AI, and who knows for what purpose. So in this case, AI, this kind of the fake AI, was reimagined as malefic spirits. So yeah, I think Keene was pretty fantastic. Yeah, all AI is built on humans. It is a smokescreen. That's very true. That's actually a perfect representation. That, when I wrote my article for the Center of International Policy, their journal, maybe a year or two ago, it's called "The False Promise of I think it's the false promise. I don't know. Oh, sorry, it's the dystopian promise of Israel's AI, or the dystopian promise of AI and warfare, something like that. Yeah, I think it's the dystopian promise of AI and warfare, and basically it talked about how the AI, as it's being used currently in warfare, is a kind of conveyor belt, a rubber stamp conveyor belt. Basically every strike gets approved with this veneer of legality, and humans are not even relegated to double checking or fact checking the information. The humans don't want to be part of the chain, right? They don't want to be part of the kill chain, because if you're part of the kill chain as like a lawyer or higher up, then you are culpable morally and legally, right? You could one day be brought before a war crimes trial. You could one day be prosecuted in your country or internationally. You could be flying someplace, land in Denmark or Italy or something, and they could grab you off the train, and you'd spend the rest of your life in jail. You don't want that as a genocidal piece of shit. So what you want is to be able to point at the robot, and that's basically what we're currently building in the U.S. Using Claude, that's Anthropic's AI, to target girls' schools in Iran. I think they killed 170 people there. More than half of which were children under the age of 12. All little girls. And of course, Israel, most famously in Gaza and elsewhere, have used their own systems, which they've named the Gospel, Lavender, and of course, most nefariously, Daddy's Home, which is to target people. It's to basically predict when people will be home with their families, so that they can be targeted and killed with their families, obviously. So you put AI in the chain so that you are no longer culpable personally, and that is the goal. That's the promise. The promise is, there are no human fingerprints on this. But of course, that's all a lie. Someone had to train and program these things. And you could only imagine what an AI trained on the behavior of the Israeli military, what would be in that mind. So, Ritae. Let's talk about it. So, Ritae obviously are very important to Sabbat. We've incorporated them mechanically into the Sabbat in this book with the humanity system and the path system. We think it's pretty solid. But the things themselves are important. I wrote all the Ritae for the official V5 Sabbat book. We didn't put any mechanics in there. I just described them and talked about them and all that. They're kind of like we agreed upon as a group, basically what the surviving big Ritae would be in that book. And I detailed those. I'm sure some fan favorites or other big ones were kind of left out. In this book, I tried to be as completionist as possible and hit all the big Ritae, and I included mechanics. And I think I mentioned this before, but I actually did write mechanics for Ritae in the official V5 Sabbat book, but those were actually never seen by my editor or developer. I was basically, as I was writing the sections, including mechanics, I was basically told we're not gonna have mechanics for them. That was kind of a decision made on high, higher than my pay grade at Paradox, since I was working directly for Paradox and Justin Achille at that point. But even though those were never delivered or submitted or whatever, I still, when we were writing this book, because of the way we approached the path and humanity as kind of this rating of identity and all that, I still reworked all the mechanics that I had written. And I don't think I'd written all the paths yet at that point anyway. So these are actually unique to this book even, which I feel was the right thing to do personally. But I actually prefer these mechanics. I think having to kind of, forcing myself to rewrite them or reimagine them mechanically outside of the kind of context of the official V5 book, which was very antagonist presenting, really was way better. And I came up with a much better product. So the Auctoritas Ritae, however you want to pronounce it, are, kind of bedrock of Sabbat. These are the big Ritaes that all Sabbat are, supposed to kind of know the basics of and how they work and how to participate in them, not necessarily how to run them. And that in a full kind of Sabbat life in there, if you could think of the Sabbat year as a ceremonial year, if you could think about the Sabbat year as a year not set in, that's kind of like pointed by these holidays in a sense. These Ritaes are these are the Ritae. So in a Sabbat year, basically, whether that's in a year or not in real time, in a Sabbat year, you're probably going to hit almost all of these Ritae. And I think that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. Most of them are pack Ritae, but of course, what makes what makes them different than Ignobilis in general is that they are all adaptable to multi-pack things, and some of them, of course, are multi-pack specific. So the system we have here is that basically all Sabbat know the basics, can perform the rudiments, blah, blah, blah. But to gain the benefits, basically your whole pack has to be present, and your priest has to have 1 dot in the Ritae advantage. And then is an ignorant priest prevents packmates from benefiting from their touchstone Ritae, which obviously sucks. And also many packs make use of specialized or unique implements, such as a chalice made from an enemy's skull, a knife stolen from a Justicar. The loss of one of these implements could potentially prevent or delay a pack from being able to carry out some of their Ritae until they are recovered, but this is at the storyteller's discretion. So we wanted, story elements, not just mechanical stuff. We didn't want the Ritae advantage to just be a road bump. I mean, obviously it's a 2 experience or 1 dot road bump, so it's not a major road bump. But definitely we wanted that role play potential of an ignorant priest or someone who wanted to become a priest, but just like no one would teach them, the Ritae, or they have to learn the Ritae on their own, that kind of thing. Or they're just naive or new. So you could kind of, help develop the character or tell the story in some case. We didn't want it to be unmoored from reality. We just wanted like a little bit of a speed bump. And we wanted it to be like, okay, this is what you need for the Ritae. You need your pack all in one place, and you need your priest, and your priest has to know what you're doing. Simple. Because the Ritae themselves are pretty powerful. So you don't want it to be too willy-nilly. And of course, it kind of also reinforces the fact that Sabbat packs are like on top of each other all the goddamn time. It's why it's suspicious if you have like your own haven, or if you're like effing around with mortals all the goddamn time, right? Why aren't you hanging with the pack? Like, what's going on there? Maybe a Ritae could have to be done or some such. Who knows? So obviously the first one is the Vauldery. It has a pretty complex system, as you can see, and a little sidebar about the Viniculum and the Tremere, because obviously we kind of modify the Tremere weakness here to make it, gel with Sabbat play. But yeah, basically the important parts about Vauldery, first and foremost, is that it gives you a Viniculum, which is kind of the minor blood bond, which has a max strength of 3 as opposed to a regular blood bond, which is max strength 6. You have all your vinculum blood bonds broken, and their bond strength is immediately reduced to 0. And then once you have a vinculum with a bond strength of 3 or higher, which is possible with other Ritae or with certain, pack types and such, then you become immune to non-vinculum blood bonds. You can drink all the vampire blood you want, basically, outside the Vauldery, and you're not going to form new blood bonds as long as you keep up the vinculum. Obviously, this is important to the Sabbat, as it maintains not just interpack loyalty, but it also ensures that you're not going to fall under the sway of elder vampires. So covens and established packs, they usually, and all vinculum is mutual now. I know in like other writings of the Sabbat, vinculum was kind of like random, and like how much vinculum you have for one person. Like you could have like a 10 bond strength for a guy and like be all over them like his best friend, but they could have a 1 bond strength for you and be like, and have like, real feelings for you that are unshaded by the blood bond. Uh, and that was fun, and that was interesting play. But it introduced kind of almost like a PvP element to the Vaulderie that really I don't really think added much, to be honest. Um, there was some interesting play to be had there, but I don't think it was. I don't think it needed to be centralized, and also it made the mechanics and the metagaming around the Vaulderie just not much fun. Uh, no, I don't think that's a good question, Gord, about the Vinculum being weak. Um, no, I think 3 extra dice is pretty good. That's like a willpower point. And I guess if you really want to convince someone, you could blow a willpower point on top of that to like re-roll dice and all that. Um, I think what it basically does is it allows you to, and also remember that person is going to have the same vinculum for you. So, uh, well, I mean, I can double check how bond strength works, but let's see here. Right. So it's actually a difficulty. If I'm That's correct. All right. So it's resisted. So it's, as far as I know, of bond strength, it's actually a difficulty you roll against. Is how it's usually worked. So only in certain instances would like maybe a storyteller rule that you would add bond strength to a roll. So it's a resolve plus intelligence roll. If I remember correctly, against the strength of the bond. I'm just remembering that off the top of my head. Is it a contest? Let me see. Yeah. Okay. No, you're right. So always treat the vinculum's bond strength as 1 when making their contested resolve, regardless of how often they. All right. Yeah. So it's a contest. Yeah. So it's either 3 dice or 6 dice. Exactly. But that's only if you resist. So in most cases, it's not going to sway you one way or the other. But I don't really think that is too weak. I think it basically is just in most cases what'll happen is a packmate will be trying to convince you something that you personally don't agree with, or you think is too risky or whatever, or maybe it like breaks one of the tenets, or who knows what. For whatever reason, you're not into what your packmate is telling you, and so they are going to lean on the vinculum to get you to agree. You're like, hey, come on, like they know you really don't want to, but they also know you have the vinculums there. So I feel the vinculum being this kind of minor tugging that could change your mind against your best efforts, I feel is fair. Because it's not supposed to be a slavish blood bond. That wouldn't really work, obviously. It's really meant to be this kind of last insurer of loyalty. And it's really only those who are kind of weak of will or can't really think things through, that are kind of led by their emotions, that are really going to be ultimately swayed by that. And I think that's fair. Also, any system that takes away a player's agency, I guess, it shouldn't be overpowered in general. Like, I have some issues with how Dominate works in Vampire the Masquerade, personally. I really don't like how prevalent Dominate is in the game. I really don't think it should be such a common discipline amongst vampires. I'm glad that it's kind of a bit nerfed against other vampires, but it's still very possible to make a basically dominate everybody vampire. It's not hard at all, and it's a useful discipline even if you don't make it vampire focused. So the temptation to make it vampire focused is going to be there. So I think any system that kind of takes away a player's role-playing decisions shouldn't be there. What I really want it for is if a player thinks, okay, well, I think this is a bad idea, but I feel the vinculum swaying me in that direction, and so I'm going to make this bad decision, like, so they don't even roll. I'm going to let the vinculum sway me, even though I think it's a bad decision. And we're gonna role play those consequences and have fun that way. Um, yeah. So I think as its role in the setting, I think the binding kind of touches upon that because it blows the sorry not the blinding the bloodbath kind of blows that up as well. I think that's the one that boosts it. Is it bloodbath or no? It's I forget which one it is. Maybe it is binding. I don't remember. Yeah, it's binding. So it's binding. So I think binding kind of boosts it to 6 for brief periods. And that kind of like cements the authority of leaders and creates packs. So you kind of have this almost ecstasy slash, psychedelic experience in a sense with all the other participants. The rave in the Matrix Reloaded, as it were, where basically you have this overwhelming sense of power, loyalty, and camaraderie with everyone around you for a night. And perhaps that will last you. That remembering that high, in a sense, will last you for a while, even if mechanically you have that lower level loyalty in your mind. Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to erring on one side or the other, I'm always going to err on player agency and all that. Like, I'm never going to, not maybe not never, but I rarely want to create a system that players are constantly being forced to go against their own best judgment and what their character is about and the needs, if and hopefully the needs of the story. So I think 3 dice is nice because it's a little bit of a risk. Most people are going to have an intelligence to resolve around 4 to 6 dice. Not always. But most characters will probably have somewhere between 4 to 6 dice. I'd say 4 to 5 would be average. So you're taking a little bit of a risk, basically going again, basically forcing the bond. But I feel the way it's written as well is it's really only when another person, another Sabbat calls upon the vinculum, basically, that it really comes into play. That it's not every argument. It's really when that other vampire is really leaning on that as opposed to, actually arguing with you, right? Like most people are going to be like, they're going to try to persuade you with the points and the logic and your feelings. And then others are basically going to just kind of depend upon that baseline loyalty. They're not really going to try to convince you. They're going to say, we're going to be doing this now. It's for the pack. It's for the Sabbat. Like remember your oaths, remember your promises, that kind of thing. Would I say that adding the vinculum rating to a dice pool when swaying someone would be a decent way to represent that sort of coerced loyalty? I wouldn't do that. I would just use the system as it is. I think basically, actually talk about it in the Vaudry. It says, pack priests and other Sabbat can call upon the vinculum to sway their brethren, forcing them to succeed in a contest of resolve plus intelligence versus bond strength to go against them. Sabbat who abuse the vinculum this way will find themselves exiled by their pack or even challenged to monumency. So it's basically there. It's kind of like not necessarily a last resort, but it's basically there to kind of show that it's real and that there are times you're going to basically kind of go against your best interests and your higher functioning mind. Even though, maybe you shouldn't. And I feel that it's not overly powerful. It's kind of a weak last resort, like a priest or a Sabbat pack member who's using that against you really probably knows they don't have a better argument for it, or they don't want to get into the details for some reason. Perhaps the mission is a secret, or perhaps they think that there's some personal reason that you would not want to do something, um, that kind of thing. So there are reasons for it. I don't think I would ever add the bond strength as a role in general, because then basically it would probably be a little too powerful. I think, and also I feel that it's pretty well represented, and I guess coerced loyalty is a way to say it. I think it's more about the fact that there is that there's magic involved, and that there's baseline level of loyalty there, and that's not really what the vinculum is for, right? The vinculum isn't there supposedly to turn you into a mindless slave. It's not there to turn you into a weapon. It's there to protect you from these massively powerful forces arrayed against you. And so it basically asks you to sacrifice some of your free will to maintain some free will, so that you are protected against the machinations and the enslavements of the blood of the antediluvians and their servants. So when other Sabbat members basically use the vinculum in this way, to basically force you to do what they want, they're really corrupting and perverting it, which we wanted that to be an aspect of the game, and we wanted it to be clear that it is a corruption and a perversion of it. And for it to be meaningful, it couldn't be too powerful. For it to be meaningful, for you to fight against it, or for you to be suspicious it was used against you, it couldn't be too powerful. If it was too powerful, then you just go along and you'd never know. If it's just powerful enough that only the weakest are kind of regularly being duped, as it were, then I feel it's a good representation, and it allows for more role play. And then we basically talk about the Tremere. Obviously, the Tremere, their blood doesn't form blood bonds well, and so their vinculum rating, when they bind others, their vinculum bond strength is always 1. So they have a very hard time. So they are kind of they break the rule about the mutual bond strength. So they will still be affected as if they have a vinculum of 3 when others come to them. But as far as others' loyalty to them, it's a 1. So their treatment in a pack can be a little, could be role played in a very different way. It also makes it more difficult for them to kind of rise in ranks within a Sabbat pack, obviously, because the level of kind of magical baseline camaraderie is just higher for everyone else. And they themselves, of course, though most Tremere will obviously have a very high intelligence resolve, and they themselves, of course, will be swayed by the blood bond. All right, let's see. The vinculum is used to stop the Sabbat from fracturing and fighting, straying too far from their pack. Those outside, it very much looks like above. 3 dice, maybe a bit too few for the effect to feel true to the flavor text. Well, I guess that's just a matter of roleplay versus mechanic on some level. I think more than 3 dice, you're really getting into a realm of enslavement, which may be kind of what you're going for from an outside-in perspective. I feel 3 dice really is strong enough that it is a threat. I mean, you can get a critical roll on 3 dice, so it's not going to happen too often. But you can definitely, with the way that dice explode in Vampire the Masquerade, you can beat 6 or 7 dice with 3 dice. If you look at the parabola of the dice in VTM, it's a better system mechanically in some ways than Requiem, with its insanely high 8 difficulty and all that stuff. where you're basically trying to make these massive dice pools for like the simplest stuff, or basically just saying please don't roll to people. So it's kind of a cleaner system mechanically than Requiem, but with the way that crits work, it can get a little wonky sometimes, where a large dice pools can fall flat, and small dice pools can suddenly explode. So it's still like a little bit of a danger. I feel that the Sabbat has fractured, like that's part of meta plot, and that if the Blood Bond was really that powerful, that couldn't have happened. If you're adding 3 dice to all social pools and all this stuff, or if you're rolling the bond strength at 6 all the time, this kind of fracturing of the Sabbat really wouldn't have been possible. So I don't really think it could be enslavement. I would say kind of the enslavement, or forced loyalty, or all Sabbat are drones or insects who talk in like chittering squeaks or whatever. I would call that mostly propaganda. Maybe that's the impression people get when like shovelheads are thrown out at a group. Like if you do creation rites and make a bunch of shovelheads and then do the binding, and they're all running around that night with a bond strength of 6, and they just got embraced and they're kind of crazy, then yeah, I could see why people would think, oh, well, all Sabbat are, mindless drones. So that aspect could be implemented with the rules as written. I just think as a baseline, having the bond strength at 3 is reasonable. It's good, and it has a good narrative strength without overpowering player choice. So in this case, I would say that player choice, agency, being able to play the game is much more important than any kind of like lore or even story needs for most of the time. That really, the way the Sabbat has been portrayed for the most part has been, kind of in a negative, outside looking in light. So I'm happy with it personally. I think it works pretty well. The binding, this is a pretty useful Ritae, actually. I know mechanically it's not as in depth as the Vaudry, which is fine. But basically, the binding is all the bond strengths of all the participants boost from 3 to 6 for one night. They become immune to any attempts to subvert their loyalty to the Sabbat. They can still be deceived. And in social combat, they're immune to any willpower damage on making them doubt their pack loyalty, blah, blah, blah. And if the Ritae is performed by a bishop or other high-ranking Sabbat, the pack can change its pack type, focus on a new arena, all that stuff. So it's not just the kind of like, we're all in this together Ritae. It's also the something has changed about the pack structure Ritae, whether you want to have a new pack type, or you're forming a new pack, like maybe you're breaking into 2 separate packs, or who knows what, or you're leaving a pack to form a new pack, that kind of thing. I often use bond strength as a difficulty as well. I think that is simpler. I'm not a big fan of contested rolls in general. I feel the reason it's a contested roll usually is to make it a little more chaotic mechanically, which is fair. Sometimes this is because it's a magical kind of esoteric thing. Sometimes it grabs a hold of you out of nowhere in a very powerful way, and other times you resist. It's just a whisper that you can kind of brush off. It's kind of like the beast. So in that sense, I think the making it a contest is kind of fun. But for just simplicity at the table, making it a difficulty, I think works fine. I want to be constantly rolling as a ST myself. So the binding is pretty basic. It's simple, but it's kind of a bedrock Ritae. And that bond strength 6, I don't know if you're going to use it like that often. Like Auctoritas Ritae. You shouldn't be like performing them all the time. And there are some limits to the Ritae, like how often they can perform and all that. But the binding is a pretty good one. The others are mostly more situational, like Vaudry binding. Like we put Vaudry up front because it's like the premier one, but then we tried to go mostly in alphabetical order. Um, but a lot of the others are situational. Bloodbath, that's basically when you're titling a new Sabbat of rank, whether that's like a bishop or archbishop or whatever. Usually someone, or I guess the way I describe it here is someone with a title beyond their pack. So there's someone who's saying they have authority over other packs or over a territory of Sabbat or something like that. So usually someone who would claim a title like bishop or archbishop, they're going to have a bloodbath. And when you have a bloodbath, they basically, you bathe that person in blood, and everyone comes, and they drink from the spilled blood usually, and swear fealty to the sect, not to you specifically. It creates a vinculum of strength 3 between the celebrants and the anointed leader, and then after a month it falls to 1. But never fails as long as the anointed retains their title and the Sabbat involved regularly celebrate the Vaudry with their pack. So your pack Vaudry reinforces the bloodbath Vaudry, even though the vinculum is just a 1, right? So you have that kind of like mystical draw, but it's so weak because they're beyond your pack that chances are it's not going to sway you except in the most extreme circumstances. And then also, as long as their anointed retains their position, has Londat of Ritae, they can also lead Auctoritas Ritae that benefit all Sabbat present that recognize their authority as if they were a priest. So they also get to like perform Ritae, like mass pack Ritaes as the like head priest basically of several packs. So that way you could kind of have big pack Ritaes with multiple packs. Whatever the limits of that obviously would be up to the ST and the story needs. Blood Feast. This, like some of these Ritae will have built-in limits. Like Blood Feast can only be used once per story. This is a pretty powerful Ritae. This is the one where you basically, similar to Bloodbath, where you gather a bunch of mortals to fill a area with blood, but unlike Bloodbath where you're just basically filling a tub, this is more the Blade blood shower kind of thing, the like rave of blood. It's basically a big bacchanal. You kill a bunch of mortals and everybody drinks their blood. It reduces everybody's hunger to 0. Obviously if it's a lot of packs, that's pretty great. If 15 vampires suddenly blood hunger 0 in a night. Regardless of any feeding flaws or clan banes. And for the rest of the night, they get a bonus. For the rest of the night after the Ritae, they may roll an extra die and take the highest for all their rouse checks. That's pretty powerful. And it stacks with bonuses to rouse checks they gain from having a high blood potency. A blood feast usually requires a pack to kill or severely wound 2 to 3 mortals per K-Night participant. So that's a lot of dead mortals. Going to attract a lot of attention. We do make note that the Communal Haven perk Slaughterhouse can make it easier to basically round up a bunch of mortals on short notice to perform Blood Feast. And that's why it's once per story, because it's a pretty big advantage. So this would usually happen when the Sabbat is like celebrating a major accomplishment, or when they're about to go on some hard business that doesn't really rise to the level of like a war party or something like that, or a wild hunt, when they're about to take on some nasty endeavor. Creation rites, another kind of staple Ritae. This one we wanted to make as open-ended as possible on some levels because we wanted it not just to be about the burying. It's really about forging a new identity and getting the vampire on a path. So the creation rites here kind of riff off the path rules a bit. So after surviving the creation rites, a K-Knight is uniquely open to forging a new identity centered around a path. If the vampire is tutored and accepts a path within a month of surviving the creation rites, they may take a new conviction or replace one of their existing convictions with a path-specific one. So it's an easy way to get on a path. So even someone converting from another sect, someone could go through the creation rites and start on a path. Often the new recruit's faith is tested by destroying the touchstone linked to a supplanted conviction, but that's not necessary. The initial path conviction will often have the Vaulderie as its touchstone Ritae. I usually give all Sabbat Vaulderie as their first touchstone Ritae. That's not a rule, but I think it makes sense. And if you read the flavor text of the creation rites, it kind of goes to show that there's all different ways of using them, that there is mass embrace and being buried and all that. But it's really about creating a new identity, not just embracing a vampire. And as you can see from the system is all about taking on a path, not your embrace or anything like that. So it's really the rites that kind of opens you up for a psychological and spiritual embrace as part of your physical embrace as a vampire. Then there's Festivo. There's a lot of there are several different names for this. In the Sabbat, I felt Festivo was kind of a nice way of putting it. So it basically, I think it's called Festival of the Dead or Festivo dell'Istinto. I'm a big fan of this Ritae, personally. I wanted an interesting system for it. Basically, this is kind of a Day of the Dead for the Sabbat, where they honor, like, their pack members who have, crossed over. This is one of the few kind of, like, death in the soul focused Ritae. I feel a lot of the Ritae are very kind of either Nodist oriented or even Cathari oriented. But this is one of the few that's like really feels kind of, death in the soul oriented. But not only do they pay homage to like those who've passed over, but in some cases they can kind of contact their deceased packmates, and in some cases let them possess them, and that kind of thing. So it has an interesting system. During the Festival of the Dead, all Sabbat that participate in the Ritae can feel the presence of anyone deceased with whom they once shared a Vaulderie, or a deep emotional connection. If their connection was especially strong, they can invite these echoes to possess them for a night. Any Sabbat allowing a former packmate, touchstone, or Diablerie victim to possess them immediately heals all willpower damage and removes all stains. If they survive the night, they could even gain knowledge of a rare discipline, lore sheet, or specialty possessed by the echo that they could purchase with experience at the storyteller's discretion. So this, I don't particularly make it specifically for a time or set, but traditionally, yes, Festivo is only performed on like a certain days and that kind of thing. But I always kind of go by the notion that the Sabbat follow kind of an esoteric calendar, a mystical calendar. So what days Festivo falls on, I think would mostly fall to like the pack priest or maybe an archbishop or a path leader or something like that. Like basically maybe there's like the best times for Festivo like fall on these certain dates, that kind of thing, and maybe there are ramifications if you do Festivo too often or are performing it outside the most auspicious nights. There could be consequences. I think that would be fun role play. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of Festivo. I think it's very interesting, and it brings like the mystical to play, which is always great, and it really shows, or should I say, it really highlights Sabbat play in a very interesting and different way than I think a lot of people are used to. It is, and my cat decided to join us for the discussion. Once they heard Festivo, they had to jump in. That's just black cat shit. Fire dance, pretty standard dancing through the fire. Um, Also about vampires that take part in a fire dance, heal 1 aggravated willpower at the Ritae's completion. If they endure the Ritae without getting burned, their Sabbat status flaws are reduced by 1 dot for the rest of the session. This reduces the shun flaw to suspect and suppresses the suspect flaw completely for the session. A Sabbat K-Knight burn during the fire dance can automatically resist or ride the wave of Terror Frenzy as long as they retain 1 aggravated wound that was inflicted by the Ritae. So as long as you have that wound from the Ritae, you automatically resist or ride the wave of Terror Frenzy going forward. This benefit also extends to their pack as long as they are in their presence. The benefit fades once the aggravated wound is healed or at the end of the story. So Fire Dance is kind of cool. If you and obviously it inures you to the fear against fire, quite literally. And it shows that you're willing to risk final death for the Sabbat and participate in this pretty dangerous Ritae. So if people ever, so it's not a punishment, but if your loyalty is questioned, participating in a fire dance is a really good way to kind of show everybody that that's not the case. That you're a loyal Sabbat and that you're willing to die for the sect and that even fire, and that you'd even like risk fire. So fire dance, good system, interesting roleplay experience. I have participated in a actual play where we ran a fire dance. Nobody really got hurt. I really don't go through the system. Yeah, I mean, I don't really go through the system. That was something that came up during the actual play, is that I really don't go through the system of how difficult it is to jump through a fire. That technically is in the V5 core book, and how difficult the fire dance should be, I feel, is really up to the ST. In the actual play, the fire dance was pretty simple. We just had to make some like checks, I believe, like athletics and all that stuff. But it's also up to how you want to set up the fire dance. If you do the classic, like kind of, there's a bonfire and you have to run and jump through the bonfire, and you can choose basically whether you jump right through the middle of the goddamn thing, or if you skirt the sides, or put your hand in it, or something like that. So it becomes kind of up to the player how they participate. In the fire dance. And so even just being there, in a sense, is enough to heal the aggravated damage, and to basically suppress the status flaws. You technically don't have to jump through the fire, but of course you're being taunted and pushed to do so by other people who you probably have a vinculum rating for, especially if you're a priest. This would be if a priest fails to jump through the fire dance, probably just kind of dances around the fire. They are technically participating in the Ritae, but perhaps people will look at them a little askance. They probably wouldn't they wouldn't suspect their loyalty, obviously, but they might think they might not be the best priest. You know, like a priest is going to be held to a higher standard than everybody else. Excuse me. Yeah, I did. Resisting frenzy, ignoring frenzy is, to be honest, frenzy is something that comes up in games pretty ad hoc. Like, it's something that I feel like really only comes up in extremis. The rules for it in V5 are a little lighter than they were in other editions. And they're not as severe and extreme. Like, frenzy isn't. In some editions, frenzy was this kind of like constant issue mechanically if you like actually played the rules. So I was very happy to make resisting frenzy a very common benefit of both Ritae and lore sheets, just so you kind of have an excuse to not really worry about frenzy too much, really. So I'm actually very happy if people don't do a lot of frenzy stuff. Um, that's fine by me. I think I personally prefer it more as a role play element that I kind of threatened players with more than something I'm constantly testing. And if they can basically throw back in my face, no, 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 I participated in that fire dance. Look at my aggravated wound. I don't give a shit about fire. Like, you can't threaten me with that. That is a great outcome for me. Um, uh, so I think that's fine, and I think, like, using the fire dance for the status effects or healing wounds is just as good as using it for Roshrik. Yeah, I see what you mean, Gord. Like, to keep them attractive or relevant, you want to make frenzy like an important part, but I wouldn't necessarily overdo it. I think rules as written or using it as a threat is perfectly fine. I think the Ritae are pretty attractive in and of themselves usually, and they can be like story elements. Like, you're invited to a fire dance by another pack, or that kind of thing. Why are they inviting you? Is it because they don't trust you guys? Do they want to kill one of you? Do they have something important to tell you in secret, and they think only a fire dance is basically going to be like kind of an appropriate place where they can do it? Are they going to try to overthrow the bishop or form an attack or something like that? All right, then there's Games of Instinct. This is kind of a classic Ritae. This is one from everywhere. Everything from like crashing your cars or like shooting people in the street to like more stealth oriented stuff, or like sneaking through a lupine's territory. Like, maybe there's like a really dangerous werewolf pack or one werewolf who have a territory nearby, and sneaking through their territory would be a great game of Instinct. But basically, this is kind of a challenge of skill to show that, like, you're a predator, that you're in touch with your beast, and that you're an asset to the Sabbat and to your pack, and that your pack is, badasses. So this is something that can be done within a pack and like pack against pack. Basically, there's lots of different examples. I wanted to make it as freeform as possible so you could come up with your own kind of game of Instinct that would be fun and interesting. And basically, the system is you kind of like set up a trophy. Like, this is how you win. And once you claim the trophy, you basically win the Ritae. It's a game. So Alsabat taking part in this Ritae heal 1 aggravated willpower at the Ritae's completion. So win or lose, you get back an aggravated willpower. If they accomplish the Ritae's goal without breaking any of its taboos, because they're rules, like if you, it could be like sneak through this werewolf's territory, but nobody is allowed to take silver bullets, or you're not allowed to use obfuscate or something like that. Like, you just have to use your wits. Or you have to do it during the full moon. That kind of thing. Or you have to go into his territory and, like, steal something. You have to steal, like, his thermos from his cabin and bring it back to me. So if they accomplish the Ritae's goal without breaking of its taboos, their Sabbat status flaws are reduced by 1 dot for the rest of the session. This reduces the shun flaw to suspect and suppresses the suspect flaw completely. So similar to Fire Dance, it can lower your suspicion. A canine that claims the trophy during the Ritae can automatically resist or ride the wave of Fury Frenzy for as long as they possess the trophy that was claimed during the Ritae. This benefit also extends to their pack when they are present. This benefit fades once the trophy is lost or at the end of the story. So unlike the aggravated wound, this is the trophy. So, like, as long as you got that thermos, or maybe you stole his flannel shirt from his cabin, and as long as you're wearing his flannel, everyone's like, oh shit, that's the werewolf's flannel that Spike stole or whatever. Your Fury Frenzy no longer affects you. You automatically can resist or ride the wave, basically, and so can your pack, as long as you've got the flannel on. Okay, Monomancy, very important Ritae. Maybe not as fun as Games of Instinct, in my opinion, but Monomancy is actually kind of a central Sabbat Ritae. The Camarilla has something similar to it, technically. I forget what they call it, but it's like a duel, and it has a kind of name, and it's traditionally fought with like stakes, and you try to stake the other guy like in a pit. So I'm sure that's a lot of fun. Technically, by V5 rules, I don't actually think that's possible anymore. But it is what it is. So Monomancy is kind of the ultimate egalitarian leveling Ritae. It's like it doesn't matter who you are. Technically, this is actually not true. But if a Sabbat's got a problem with you, they can call you out, and you can either basically back down and take the L, or you can fight about it in whatever way you choose. Usually it's combat. Sometimes it can be other things, like a rap battle or a poetry reading or chess or who knows what. I played in a game where there was a chess match, Monomancy, that resulted in where Diablerie was on the line. Though I think I won as an NPC, which, I mean, it wasn't really fair. I think I was like some terrible Tremere anti-Tribu NPC that I kind of came in just to like play the game for a night. But that's neither here nor there. So Monomancy can take any form you want, but the basic idea is that it's a duel between two Sabbat vampires when there's a disagreement. And it can be anything from you're my priest and I think you're a terrible priest and I think I should be in charge. And they can either back down and be like, you're right, or they can fight about it. And it's kind of and it's an Auctoritas Ritae because it's a big deal. Two Sabbat going at each other in this way is a big deal. And it can also sometimes result in Diablerie. Like, you're weak, you shouldn't be in the sect. Like, I'm going to reclaim your blood, blah, blah, blah. But if you do Diablerie for this Ritae, basically that's all you get. You don't, any of your other claims are kind of moot because you claim the Heart's Blood. And I think we have a little sidebar in here. A few Ritae push Sabbat to Diablerie. Unless the Ritae states otherwise, they incur the usual stains and humanity loss for committing this act. If the Sabbat is on a path, they suffer 1 aggravated willpower damage instead of losing their last humanity dot. This trumps any penalty a Ritae inflicts. Okay, so for Monomancy, a Sabbat who witness or participate in Monomancy are unable to take part in another for the rest of the session. So, you can only do one Monomancy a session, even if you're not involved, if you're just watching, if you're a celebrant. Once a Monomancy is over, and remember, for Ritae, the whole pack has to be there. So if it's a Monomancy between two different pack mates, from pack members from two different packs, both packs have to show up in whole. Once a Monomancy is over, its results cannot be undermined or questioned through social conflict for the rest of the session. If the victor chooses the Diablerie, they cannot mitigate the humanity loss in any way unless their humanity rating is 1. The loser's allies are also likely to hold a grudge. At the storyteller's discretion, Sabbat without any status or with the suspect or shunned flaw cannot call for a Monomancy. A challenge against a Cainite with 3 or more dots of Sabbat status must be officiated by a Cardinal, Priscus, or Seraphim. So you can challenge any Sabbat, but if they got high enough status, then you've got to get somebody who trumps them in status, or who is, or at the very least, is considered a big deal to officiate the thing. Because if a Sabbat member with that much status goes down in a Monomancy, like, that's going to cause huge ripples. Everyone's going to question, especially if you don't have Sabbat status 3, everyone's going to question the legality of the Monomancy and assume it was a murder and that you just called it a Monomancy after the fact. So you're going to need somebody there who can basically officiate and make it kosher, make it cool. So basically it resolves arguments. Diablerie can come into it because at the end it is a duel. You could, eat the person you're dueling, but if that's the case, that's all you get out of it. If you eat your priest, you don't become the new priest. If you had an argument with someone and you eat them, then in a way that settles the argument, but does it really? And so on. And it settles the matter for the session. And a session, as we know, can last more than a night, and so on and so forth. But for the rest of the session, basically that matter is settled. And, social conflict, including social combat, cannot be used to kind of bring up the matter again until the next session. Okay, Pala or Ballo Grande. That's actually a riff on basically a mistranslation in the original Sabat Player's Guide, where basically they were like, well, how do you say grand ball, like big ball, or in Spanish? And they're like, Pala. But of course, Pala in Spanish, I now know, means doesn't mean a ball or fiat or fest or whatever. It means a soccer ball or a basketball. So it means like big soccer ball. So that's a bit of a riff on that. Basically, I say that, American Sabat jokingly refer to it as Pala Grande, and so on. I wanted to. I didn't want to totally misrepresent or forget, the lore or the heritage of it. I thought it was funny, and it's definitely something an American Sabat would do. Or American anybody would do. Would basically just be like, well, how do you say big, ball in Spanish? And somebody who knows, like, elementary school Spanish would say Pala, and that would be it. So this is basically just a big party in a sense, but it's really about being a vampire. Like, this is the holiday or event where the Sabat case kind of like revels in being a vampire and being undead. And they often like to do it in other people's domains. So often they'll break the masquerade. They will do their best to impress important Sabat or at least Sabat they respect. Maybe a Seraphim or some other like local badass or whatever. And then it's also called the Red Banquet. And they usually prefer to do it in Camry or Anarch domains because once they're done with the party, which will last like a couple of days or a couple of nights or a week or whatever at most, then when the hunters come to see what the fuck happened, they're long gone. And the Camry and Anarchs can deal with it. And some paths also think it's an auspicious time to embrace. Cathari think it's a interesting time to embrace people. They the Cathari take a more nuanced approach to the whole affair, seek out mortals embodying the worst that humans have to offer. These paragons of filth are tortured, teased, flattered, and frightened to their limits, and then offered the release of death. Most are killed, but those that meet the Cathari's fickle standards of perversity are instead embraced. So you basically find like the most awful piece of shit you can, and you alternate basically like torturing them and showing them the time of their life for that night until they like basically meet their psychological spiritual breaking point. And then basically if they met some some invisible standard you'd set in your own mind, then instead of killing them at the end of the night, you embrace them. So a pretty fun thing. It reminds me of that Steve Carell, Paul Rudd movie, Dinner for Schmucks, where they basically have a dinner party and everybody invites like the most ridiculous off the wall asshole they can find, to basically make fun of them and parade them in front of their friends. And whoever is like the biggest schmuck, the biggest not really jerk, but like nerd, I guess, is kind of like crowned the winner, and the person who brought them, is gets kudos, is awesome. So for the Palo Grande, the Ballo Grande, Sabat heal 1 aggravated willpower or health upon awakening the night after participating in this Ritae. Once the Ritae is concluded, all Sabat that participated in at least 3 nights of the Ritae do not register as undead or vampires to mystical or technological scrutiny for the rest of the story. Even after this effect wears off, their auras remain cleansed of all signs of diablerie. So that's a great goddamn Ritae. It's a long one, but the effects are huge for Sabat, and it's not really the kind of Ritae that non-Sabat are going to be able to really participate in any meaningful way, obviously. So the like Diablo hiding aspects of it are a nice kicker. But for Sabat, not really that important since Diablo isn't a stigma for them. It's just kind of like a nice little kicker benefit. Yes, I mean it would let La Sombra skate under the radar of vampire. I mean it would help the La Sombra escape detection as vampires if something is detecting for vampires. But obviously, the La Sombra's flaw, depending on which one you're using, I believe there's an alternate flaw in the Vampires Player's Guide, and I provide an alternate flaw in Crowned in Shadow. But the baseline flaw would still be in effect for like their technological whatever shit. And I know some people, I don't know if it's actually written in the book, Chicago by Night. As I said, I don't own it. Is their flaw actually added as dice or something for technological vampire detectors? If so, then I would say it still wouldn't be in effect. But perhaps the roll would only be... Oh, okay. So their Bane severity is added to any roll that technologically detects vampires. Okay, so I guess my ruling in that case is they don't detect as vampires, so the baseline roll would no longer be in effect, so it would only be the Bane severity dice, I guess. So basically, if there's a device that detects vampires with a die pool of 5 or something, and you have a Bane severity of +2, then if you participated in this Ritae, then they would only be rolling 2 dice against you. So it would be your Bane basically exerting yourself. But of course, I don't think that applies to... Does that also apply to mystical detection? So if it doesn't apply to mystical detection, then they're still free. So, because in general, in my opinion, I always default to Banes. I always feel Banes should basically be... Bane should always be respected, top of the priority. So Banes, if rules contradict each other versus a Bane, I'm usually personally, it's just how I like it. It's definitely not a V5 hard and fast rule. I just feel that Banes are just so emblematic of character development and personality that Bane should always kind of trump other things. So even if you come across something, so like Nosferatu is a good example, right? So their technological device might detect you're a vampire, but you're still Nosferatu. So the Bane and all that is still going to come into play. Same with stuff with like flesh crafting and all that. Like your Nosferatu Bane is always gonna come through. Maybe it can be suppressed for like a scene at best or something like that, but your Nosferatu Bane's gonna come through one way or the other. All right, let me see how much time I've got. Okay, I got a little bit of time, and just 3 Ritae to go. So I'm gonna push through, and make it happen. All right. Sermons of Cain. So this is your kind of classic proselytizing Sabbat thing. I'm not a big fan of kind of like evangelical Sabbat, like, hey, everybody join the Sabbat. I think the Sermons of Cain are more kind of inward-facing than outward-facing, personally. But they're pretty cool. In the Last Dance Vernald adventure for Renegade, there is actually a Sermon of Cain, basically. There is, like, you can, during the party preparation part of the adventure, you can basically have a storyteller, a nodist storyteller, basically as the entertainment for the party, and he basically gives a Sermon of Cain, though from a very Church of Cain coded point of view, which and that actually has knock-on effects for the story because it can potentially help reveal the Reynald's murderer. So the Sermons of Cain are basically nodist lore. I do get a little nod to Bahari. Packs led by Bahari or others with a more complex understanding of Kane often refer to this Ritae as Sermon of Faith. So it's still, you can still kind of be a Lilith-focused pack or have a Lilith-focused priest who can make use of this Ritae, though they're going to flavor it a little differently. So basically, this is all about kind of the your heritage of a vampire, and basically to kind of reaffirm the centrality of the Book of Nod or the Revelations of the Dark Mother, as I said, and the kind of preordained or righteous nature of their cause. Because as I said, like the Battle of the Antediluvians is kind of an esoteric, spiritual, theological battle on some level. You can't just fight them with bullets and swords. So the system here is also about vampires taking part in a sermon, heal 1 superficial willpower damage at the Rite's completion. This is going to be a more common, unlike Festivo or Balo or some of the others, where they're kind of like big holidays. The Sermon of Cain, though an important Ritae, Auctoritas, can technically be done, pretty often. So its benefits can't be really over the top. So heal superficial willpower damage. A Cainite who testifies to their sins and failings during the Ritae gains the status flaw suspect. You're like, I'm a sinner, basically, or I, didn't believe in Cain, or who knows what. And you get suspect until the end of the story. And as long as you possess the suspect flaw, you automatically resist or ride the wave of hunger frenzy. This benefit also extends to their pack when they are in their presence. This benefit fades once the flaw is lost or at the end of the story. A Cainite that is already suspect or shunned will not be allowed to testify or gain the benefit of the Ritae. So if you're already suspect or shunned, you can't come forward and testify, right? They don't want to hear from you in a sense. But if you're like perceived as like clean or pure, and you come forward and purge yourself and like do a confession, then you can get the added benefit. I would say it would be up to the ST whether someone who's suspect or shunned, they'd have to be present because if they're a pack member. But it would be up to the ST if they get the healing of the Ritae as well, the willpower healing. An ST could rule that if you're a suspect or shunned, that you also wouldn't get the benefit of the healing, but that's a gray area, which is fine. I mean, by the wording, it sounds like they wouldn't get the benefit of the superficial willpower healing, but I would say that's up to the storyteller. And there are lots of ways to get rid of suspect or shunned with the other Ritae. Okay, so War Party. This is the, like, we're going to go kill somebody who's a big deal, and we need to, like, gird ourselves spiritually and mystically, because this guy is going to be a problem to take down, and it's usually one guy, usually with a War Party. So the Antediluvians were immortal once, and only their oldest pawns know if they have an Achilles heel left over from their breathing days. So it's like, okay, we're going to take down this Methuselah, and he's going to hopefully, tell us about his sire. We're going to kill this 4th or 5th gen vampire, and he's going to tell us about their sire. So, and the goal of taking those down is usually the Dauber. So, a Dauber is under the effect of this Ritae, gains 6 experience points per success on a Dauber roll. So it's huge. It like basically doubles the benefit of Daubry. Dauberizing the target of a war party inflicts 1 aggravated willpower damage on Dauberus instead of any humanity loss if they are on a path. So not only does it more experience, but you basically dodge the humanity loss. Pretty big deal. Participating in a successful war party increases the Sabbat status to 2 dots for the story. So if you have 0, it goes to 2. If you have 3, no benefit. Those under the effects of a war party cannot gain the benefit of any Ritae other than the Vaulderie until the target of the war party is destroyed or the war party is abandoned. Abandoning this Ritae is a mark of great shame, and a pack gains the status flaw suspect until they can redeem themselves. This Ritae does not allow more than 1 Cainite to commit Daubry upon the target. So you basically are committing yourselves to killing this dude. All other Ritae you basically are forbidden to participate in until the war party is over, or you give it up. And if you give it up, it's a mark of shame. But the benefits for killing the dude for the Dauberist are big. It's huge. So if you're planning on Dauberizing someone important, war party is a way to go. Um, it's a weird touchstone Rite war party. I believe Reclaimers and basically Nodists have it as one of their example touchstone Rites, which makes sense. Um, but unless you're basically running a like kill them all cryptic game, I don't know how often you're going to run a war party. So I don't know how often it's going to come up. But Touchstone Rite aren't just about performing those Rite. They're also about your commitment to those Rite and what those Rite mean to you. So even like if they come up in discussion or their implements are stolen or another pack does it wrong, like if there's a pack that you're allied with that failed a war party, that would be a personal problem for you. You would be like, oh my, those guys, they would like have personally disrespected your beliefs by basically fucking up a war party. So that would be an interesting role play experience that doesn't actually require you or your pack to perform the Rite. Then finally, the last Auctoritas Rite, and I'll close here after this and a brief chat about Ignobilis. So the Wild Hunt, kind of alphabetically the last one, and it makes sense that it kind of closes it out because it's basically probably the rarest Rite, really. Like this is the kind of Rite that's only going to come up often from like the focus of a story. Technically, in Our Graves Are Empty, you could run this Rite because there's you've eventually discover a traitor basically in that adventure. Spoilers. So it's you can discover there's a traitor. You can actually run the whole adventure and not discover the traitor. So the Wild Hunt Rite could actually technically be run there because it's all about hunting traitors to the Sabbat. So as long as it's basically often held under a full moon, it's a last resort to justice, and the prize is always the heart's blood of the traitor. So the only way you kind of conclude it is with a Dabri or an attempted Dabri, is to kill the guy, dead. So the benefit of it is as long as you are actively pursuing the target of a wild hunt, all Sabbat taking part in the Rite gain a +2 die bonus to all wits rolls. Weak mortals find the Canaanites nondescript, have difficulty identifying you, often confuse them for a face in the crowd. So it makes you kind of like perfect urban predator hunters. Because you're trying to find this person, and who knows where they've went. When the target is destroyed by a Sabbat Canaanite, all vampires under this Rite become aware of the victor's identity as the Rite fades. So it's like, burr, burr, like this is the dude who did it if they're Sabbat. Of course, if they're murdered by somebody else, that's a whole other problem. The victor immediately gains 1 dot of Sabbat status, and any status flaws they already have are suppressed for the rest of the story. So this is a way to actually gain free status dots. So that's pretty great. Sabbat pursuing a traitor on the auspices of this Rite cannot benefit from any other Auctoritas Rite other than the Valkyrie for the rest of the story or until the target is destroyed. So it's similar to War Party. And if the Rite is abandoned or the target is destroyed by a non-Sabbat, all Canaanite hunters under this Rite gain the status flaw suspect. If they already have this flaw, they gain the status flaw shunned instead. So unlike War Party, where you can get suspect or whatever, you guys can actually get shunned from this. So you do not want to fuck up a wild hunt. And it's basically right. That's basically correct, Gord. These Rite are basically about, hey, this has to get done. Like, stop fucking around. Don't do other shit. Like, of course you got to do the Valkyrie, but everything else can wait until this traitor is found, or in the case of the War Party, this important vampire is eaten. Like, get to it. So unlike War Party, Wild Hunt, and you can't do both, obviously. Wild Hunt doesn't give you any benefits or doesn't assuage your humanity or identity in any way when you Dauberize the dude, other than the regular benefits of Daubry. And also, War Party, technically, they just have to be destroyed. The Rite says that they should be Dauberized, that it's the heart's blood you want. but technically by the system, you can just destroy them. Role-playing wise, you would probably want to say you tried to delaberize them, or there was a reason that you felt you couldn't. In old school vampire, you'd be like, oh, well, they were, touched by the taint of the infernal or something, which is still some shit you could say, just it wouldn't really mean anything the way it did in old vampire. You could, in role-playing, you could be like, they were possessed by a demon or something. And most vampires would basically be like, what? That's crazy. Except for those who read Tattered Facade, obviously. So that doesn't give you any benefit. So it's really about hunting them down and the kind of political, social mobility of this Ritae, as opposed to War Party, which is basically is about power and knowledge and winning the Gehenna War. Wild Hunt is basically about keeping people loyal, punishing traitors, and rewarding those who have basically enforced the system, have kept the Sabbat whole, as it were. And obviously, since the Sabbat is fractured, and the hierarchy is kind of fucked up, those benefits are not, there's not a lot of benefits to it. Unfortunately, but they still exist. And getting a dot of Sabbat status is pretty good. And this is probably not going to happen too often. So, lastly, and before I take off, is the Ignobilis Ritae. So these are basically like kind of the ad hoc Ritae. I'll just read the system here. Unless they have another function, such as punishment or contrition, these Ritae can be used to change a pack's resonance to match the resonance of the pack priest. Pretty useful for some path advantages. Or to heal each packmate of 1 superficial willpower damage. Each pack type have their own Ritae, and priests will often craft Ignobilis Ritae to suit a need. So these are just kind of like ad hoc Ritae. There's actually a kicker advantage to the Ritae advantage called Innovator. Which basically, because sometimes the storyteller, if you tell the storyteller, oh, I want to do this Ritae, I want it to do this, I want it to be an Ignobilis Ritae, and I want it to have a very specific benefit, the storyteller might turn that into a project or a plot, or they might just call for a roll. It might be like, okay, why don't you roll this plus politics or this plus occult or whatever, and let me see if you can put a Ritae together like that. And maybe they'll tell you the shit you need to get. There's actually a kicker in the Ritae advantage called Innovator that gives you a bonus on any roll like that. Any roll where you're like, I'm inventing a new Ritae. Innovator lets you do that, which could also be of use when exploring the Numinous Ritae, which is what we'll get to. So Ignobilis is basically the catch-all category of Ritae. Technically, all the pack types, their little advantage is an Ignobilis Ritae that's specific to that pack type that you probably shouldn't let other pack types emulate or reproduce. I would say those are specific to those pack types and kind of the benefit of having a pack type. But other than that, it's all gravy. If you want a Ritae, Ignobilis Ritae, that helps you hunt, or helps you hide your haven, or helps you get money, right? Maybe you've got a Ritae called smash and grab. I don't know, right? Where you basically bust into a place and rob a bank or rob a jewelry store or hold up a train, right? That would be pretty cool. That would be fun. And maybe it would give you a resource benefit, and you could turn it into a Ritae. And what that would basically mean is you'd create this kind of ritualized way of doing that thing. And that would be a blast and a lot of fun. All right, so next time I will talk about Numinous Ritae. There are not as many, but I suspect it will take me a longer time to get through it, and maybe I'll have more questions. And these are basically the Ritae category we invented. These are the esoteric, quasi-broken, incomplete Ritae, which are supposed to be powerful enough to defeat the Antediluvians maybe one day if you get them right. They're all flawed. They all do unique and interesting things. And you kind of have to buy them individually. I think you can either buy them with advantage dots with the Ritae advantage, Or you can take the Ritualist pack type, and I think you get a Numinous Ritae for free with the Ritualist pack type. Oh, good. I'm glad that you used the Numinous Ritae in your game. Next time you're on, hopefully when I'm talking about Numinous Ritae, you can tell me all about it, Gord. Actually, I'd love to hear how the Numinous Ritae, which Numinous Ritae was it that you guys performed? If you're still around. Oh, Labyrinth Rune. Okay, personal favorite of mine. Praise Kane. Um, I think Labyrinth Rune is a great one. That's the one where you can It's kind of the meta Rite. It's the most numinous of the numinous Rite, in my opinion, because it's the one that basically lets you break game rules. It lets you change game rules around, fuck with your character sheet, do all kinds of crazy shit. It's a great Rite. So I'm not surprised that the players. I'm sure a player read that Rite and was like, "Oh shit, I'm about to change my life and make my storyteller super mad." It's definitely that kind of Rite. I think when I wrote it, I was like, "Oh, players who know the rules are going to take one look at this Rite, not necessarily rules lawyers, but people who are into like kind of the meta aesthetics and mechanics and all that stuff are going to look at this Rite and they're going to think of a million ways to basically break shit, and that's wonderful." I'm very happy with that Rite. Yeah, that's actually a Rite that came out of a Sabat LARP that I ran with my partner in Los Angeles. Um, and like a lot of these Numinous Rite are actually named after the packs in some Sabat LARPs I've run, and specifically the Labyrinth Rune was like a Lilin pack that was kind of obsessed with like figuring out the secrets of a labyrinth, basically. Okay, so I'll talk about Numinous Rite next time. It was great talking to you all. Thanks for all the questions, Gord. I appreciate it. I'll upload this as soon as I can onto YouTube. Yes, as always, praise King.